wasn't real, and the number didn't exist, the imaginary asshole's ultimatum would expose the ugly truth to the entire camp. When Kate's magical hands had healed those 2 chest wounds 5 days ago, there'd been a price. A big price. His sanity. Although, considering how Zane and Kaz had walked in on him while he'd been ranting at the corner of the cabin for no apparent reason, there'd probably been plenty of conversations concerning his sanity already. Pacheco had been immensely amused by the incident and determined to engineer a repeat performance. Conversely, abject humiliation was something Rawls had no intention of participating in twice, so he'd locked down his reactions and took to fiercely pretending that the asshole tormenting him didn't exist. If the bastard would just shut the fuck up and let him get a couple hours of shut-eye. Suddenly the singing stopped. Surprised, Rawls straightened and turned to face his see-through nemesis. Had his frustrated mental demand affected the ghost? Could dealing with Pacheco really be that easy? A wolf whistle pierced the clearing, followed by the exaggerated lip-smacking sounds of kissing. "Look who's headed our way." Normally, big tits crank my cock, but under the circumstances, that package of skin and bone will have to do. "What?" Rawls turned, following Pacheco's stare, and heat instantly unfurled in his stomach and wound through his chest. The hot, itchy prickle marched straight up his neck and into his face as well. It was a familiar and annoying reaction. One that struck any time Faith Ansell, the dark-haired, blue-eyed walking freckle they'd rescued during the lab recon, was in his general proximity. The woman had some insanely strong mojo. Not that he'd noticed this mojo all those months ago when he'd first spotted her at the airport terminal while waiting for his flight to Hawaii to board. No, this damnable reaction hadn't infected him until he'd touched her back at her lab. Somehow the simple act of putting his hands on her had supercharged his physical awareness. Of course, she'd cold-cocked him at the time with a piece of pipe. The incident still made him grin. Even though it had hurt like hell, he admired that kind of spunk. As he'd been doing for days now, he ignored his body's awkward reaction. She was close enough he should have heard her approach. Would have heard her if a repetitive, annoying ditty hadn't decimated his eardrums. "Tell you what, Doc, you do her here and I'll give you the night off. How's that for a compromise?" The hope that he'd stumbled on a means of dealing with the bastard fizzled. Obviously, mental demands failed to flip the switch on the ghost's voice box. "Lieutenant Rawlings." The lilt in Faith's voice turned his name into a question and drove that scratchy, uncomfortable prickle straight down his spine, where it played hell with his heartbeat. She slowed as she approached, watching him with furrowed brows and tentative eyes. "Do you have a moment?" "A gal like that, all buttoned up and proper? I bet she's got a kinky streak. I bet she's into bondage or some shit. I bet you could get her on her knees with your cock in her mouth after a compliment or two." Rawls's jaw tightened. He tried like hell to ignore the troll's words, but they lodged in his brain, a burning, vivid image, that dark, sleek hair of hers rippling like a waterfall below him, her soft mouth moving up and down. Sweet Jesus. Grimly, he shook the image away. "What can I do for you, Dr. Ansell?" Pacheco's belly laugh rolled across the creek bank. Rawls prayed she hadn't guessed his train of thought as easily as his ghostly stalker had, but the fact that she backed up a good 2 feet as her uncertainty devolved into outright nervousness was a clear indication she'd picked up on something. "2 dumbass doctors sitting in a tree, Kissing." Pacheco's voice hit a sing-song rhythm. Rawls winced.